She thought she could steal my family's road and lock me out of my own cabin. Big mistake. I turned her entire neighborhood into a concrete maze that reared like death itself when a power-drunk HOA president blocked my cabin access. She had no idea she was messing with a construction contractor who owned the very road she lived on. What followed was 10 days of perfectly legal hell that destroyed her empire, exposed a dark murder secret, and sent her fleeing Pine Valley forever. This isn't just revenge porn, folks. This is what happens when you push the wrong person too far. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? My name is Logan Brooks, and this whole mess started 3 months ago when I got the call that changed everything. I was in the middle of pouring foundation for a commercial building when my phone rang. The lawyer's voice was somber as he told me my grandfather, Henry Brooks, had passed away. Grandpa Henry wasn't just family to me. He was my mentor, the man who taught me everything about construction and, more importantly, about standing up for what's right. He left me his cabin in Pine Valley, a beautiful property nestled at the foot of the mountains that we built together with our own hands 20 years ago. The will had an odd line in it that I didn't pay much attention to at first. Remember, son, we own more than just the cabin. Check the 1955 deed. I figured it was just Grandpa being cryptic as usual. Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to that cryptic message. Grandpa Henry was never one for unnecessary words. Every piece of advice he gave me over the years had purpose. Like the time he taught me that the strongest concrete needs the right amount of water, not too much, not too little. Same with life, Logan. He'd said, balance is everything. He'd built Brooks Construction from nothing, starting with a single wheelbarrow and a determination to do every job right. By the time he retired, we were pouring foundations for half the commercial buildings in the county. He taught me that reputation was worth more than any quick profit, that your word was your bond, and that sometimes the hardest thing to do was also the right thing to do. The first time I drove up to Pine Valley after the funeral, I was hit with a wave of memories. The smell of pine trees, the gravel crunching under my heavy-duty truck tires, the way the morning light hit the cabin's concrete pillars that Grandpa and I had poured together. But my nostalgia was interrupted when I spotted a woman in her early 50s taking photos of my cabin with a calculating look on her face. She was dressed in a crisp business suit that seemed entirely out of place in the rustic setting. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out of my truck. She turned to me with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "I don't recall being notified about any visitors to our community," she said, her voice cold as fresh concrete. I pulled out my keys and the paperwork from the lawyer. "I'm Logan Brooks, Henry's grandson. This cabin belongs to me now." Her eyes narrowed to slits, and I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Brooks? I don't remember that name on our homeowners association member list." I couldn't help but chuckle. "That's because this cabin was built in 1970, long before your HOA even existed." He stood there silent for a moment, her fake smile twitching at the corners. "I'm Barbara Fitzgerald, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association. We'll need to review your situation." The way she said review made it sound like a threat. Within the first week, I received 15 violation notices. 15. The concrete driveway had unauthorized patches, even though those repairs were from 1990. My construction trailer was deemed an eyesore despite being parked behind the cabin. My truck was too commercial for a residential area. Each notice came with a fine, and each fine came with Barbara's signature and a little smiley face next to it. That's when my neighbor Tom Sullivan stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and a warning. "Welcome to Barbara's kingdom," he said, shaking his head. "Last year, she drove out 3 families. Good people, too. The Martinezes, the Patels, and the Jacksons. All of them lived here for years before Barbara took over. Tom was a friendly guy in his mid-40s, the kind of neighbor who'd help you pour a driveway without being asked. But when he talked about Barbara, something dark flickered in his eyes. Just be careful, Logan. She's got her husband Brad backing her up, and he's a lawyer. Not a good one, mind you, but he knows enough to make your life hell with paperwork." As Tom left that evening, I noticed him pause at his truck and look back at me. "Your grandpa was a good man," he said quietly. "He kept his word even when it cost him. Don't let her drive you out like the others." That night, I sat in the cabin looking at old photos on the wall. There was one of Grandpa and me setting the foundation posts, both of us covered in concrete dust and grinning. Another showed him teaching me how to read grade levels, the transit balanced on its tripod. On his workbench, I found an old receipt for surveyor services dated 2019 with a handwritten note just in case. There was also a map on the wall with red circles drawn around what looked like property boundaries. I noticed something else too, a series of dated notebooks on the shelf. Grandpa's project logs going back decades. The most recent one had a bookmark on a page dated just 2 months before he died. The entry read, "Barbara F. getting aggressive again. Time to prepare Logan. The truth can't stay buried forever, just like Emily." I was starting to reinforce a cracked foundation wall when my phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. "Your grandfather kept his mouth shut for 10 years. You should too. A friend." So I looked out the window just in time to see a black Lexus with tinted windows slowly cruise past. No license plate. Something about that car nagged at me, like a foundation crack you know is there, but can't quite see yet. I had a feeling this was about more than just HOA violations and property lines. Whatever Grandpa had been keeping quiet about, Barbara Fitzgerald was desperate to keep it buried. But as any construction worker knows, secrets are like water in concrete. Eventually, they find their way to the surface. The next morning, I woke up to find a certified letter taped to my door. Barbara wasn't wasting any time. The letter informed me that there would be an emergency HOA meeting that evening, and my attendance was strongly encouraged. I showed up to find about 80% of the Pine Valley residents crammed into the community center, most of them looking like they'd rather be getting a root canal. Barbara stood at the podium in another power suit, this time navy blue, tapping her manicured nails against the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she began, though her tone suggested she expected nothing less. "We need to discuss the maintenance of our private roads." She clicked through a presentation showing various photos of the road leading into Pine Valley. "As you all know, maintaining our high standards requires funding. I'm proposing a new road maintenance fee of $500 per month for all properties." The room erupted in murmurs, but Barbara raised a hand for silence. "This fee will ensure our roads remain pristine and properly maintained." I stood up and every head in the room turned to look at me. "Excuse me, Barbara, but my cabin has its own concrete driveway that I maintain myself. I don't use the HOA roads for maintenance or access." She smiled that cold smile again. "Oh, but you do, Mr. Brooks. You have to drive through our roads to get to your property. No pay, no access." Her husband Brad nodded like a bobblehead doll from his seat in the front row. "From a legal standpoint, the HOA has every right to control access to its private roads," he said in a nasal voice that made me want to pour concrete in his mouth. "Those who benefit from our infrastructure must contribute to its upkeep." I could feel my jaw clenching, but I kept my voice level. "I'll need to review the property records before agreeing to anything." Barbara's smile widened. "Of course, you have 30 days to comply, or we'll be forced to take appropriate measures." What struck me most about that meeting was how the other residents reacted. Most kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with Barbara like she was Medusa herself. I noticed the Hendersons, an elderly couple who'd lived here for 20 years, actually flinch when Barbara's gaze swept over them. After the official meeting ended, several neighbors approached me quietly in the parking lot. "Be careful," whispered Janet Morrison. No relation, despite the shared last name. "Barbara has ways of making life miserable for anyone who stands up to her. She once fined the Garcias $3,000 for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox." Another neighbor, Paul Reeves, added, "She's got connections at the county office too. Amazing how her property tax assessments always seem to come in lower than everyone else's." These whispered warnings painted a picture of a woman who turned a simple homeowners association into her personal thief. After the meeting, I spent hours going through Grandpa Henry's files. That's when I found it tucked between old construction permits and rebar invoices. A deed from 1955 with an interesting clause. Easement granted to future residents of the valley for passage across Brooks family property. Wait, what? I read it again, then checked the map on the wall. The property lines were different from what Barbara had shown in her presentation, off by about 20 feet. According to this document, the road everyone used to access Pine Valley wasn't HOA property at all. It was Brooks' property, and the HOA only had an easement, which meant the right to use it, not own it. Tom showed up at my door the next evening with another six-pack and what seemed like carefully casual timing. "How'd the meeting go?" he asked, though something in his eyes suggested he already knew. "Barbara's trying to shake me down for road fees," I told him. "But I found something interesting in my grandfather's papers." Tom leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "You should talk to Mike Johnson. He's been surveying property in this area since before Barbara showed up. Might be able to confirm what you found." He paused, taking a long pull from his beer. "By the way, does the cabin have a safe or anything? Your grandpa once asked me to." "Never mind. Forget I mentioned it." Barbara's harassment campaign intensified over the next week. She would patrol past my cabin every morning at 7 sharp, taking photos of my construction equipment from every angle. The violation notices became more ridiculous. Concrete dust on vehicles exceeds cleanliness standards. Construction materials visible from road. Commercial vehicle parked in residential zone. Each notice came with escalating fines. Other neighbors started whispering when I passed, and I heard through the grapevine that Barbara was telling everyone she was going to make an example of me. "Nobody disrespects the HOA rules," she'd apparently said at the last book club meeting. "Not on my watch." The situation reached a new low when Brad sent another certified letter, this one with legal letterhead from his law firm, Fitzgerald and Associates, though I was pretty sure he was the only associate. "Mr. Brooks," it read, "you have 30 days to comply with HOA regulations as outlined in bylaw 15.3.2. Failure to comply will result in the HOA exercising its right to control access to the private road serving Pine Valley. This is your final warning." I noticed Barbara had included a sticky note with another smiley face and the words "TikTok" written in purple ink. That night I called Tom. "Hey, you mentioned Mike Johnson. How do I reach him?" There was a pause before Tom answered. "I'll bring him by tomorrow." "Logan, there's something else you should know, but Mike should be there when I tell you." Monday morning arrived with a surprise that made my blood run cold. I loaded up my truck with rebar and forms for a foundation job, only to find my path blocked by a massive iron gate where the Pine Valley entrance used to be. It was 10 feet tall, electronic with a keypad entry system and a sign that read Pine Valley HOA. Members only. Authorized access required. Barbara stood next to it in a pressed burgundy suit, her smile so wide it looked painful. "Oh, Logan," she called out in a sing-gong voice. "I forgot to mention at the meeting, we've upgraded our security. Only paying members get the gate code. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience." She wasn't sorry at all, and we both knew it. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt real anger bubbling up like concrete curing too fast. "You can't do this. I have the right to access my property." Barbara pulled out her phone and pretended to check something. "Actually, I can. You refuse to pay the road maintenance fee, so you're not entitled to use our roads. Feel free to sue me." She looked me up and down with disdain. "Oh, wait. Can construction workers even afford lawyers? I suppose you could try legal aid." She laughed, a sound like rebar scraping concrete. "Brad, tell them about property law." Her husband emerged from their Lexus, adjusting his too-tight tie. "The HOA has every right to restrict access to private property, including roads. It's all perfectly legal." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. I'd been in construction for 20 years, dealt with difficult clients, unreasonable inspectors, and every kind of obstacle you could imagine. But this was different. This was personal. Barbara wasn't just trying to inconvenience me. She was trying to break me. As I stood there, I noticed other residents arriving for work, only to find themselves locked out too. The confusion on their faces quickly turned to anger. But when they saw Barbara standing there, that anger morphed into resignation. They quietly entered the code she provided them, heads down, defeated. It was like watching people enter a prison of their own making. One woman, Margaret Chen, caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before driving through. Even in their submission, I could see they hated this, hated her, but fear kept them silent. I had to park my truck on the public road and hike 2 miles through rough terrain to reach my cabin, climbing over barbed wire fences and through thick brush. My work boots weren't made for hiking, and by the time I arrived, I was scratched up, exhausted, and furious. The cabin was dark because, surprise, surprise, the power had been cut. A notice on the door informed me that electrical service had been suspended for maintenance evaluation inside using a flashlight. I searched for anything that might help me fight back. That's when I remembered Grandpa's odd message about the safe. I found it embedded in the concrete floor of the basement, hidden beneath a metal plate I'd helped him install years ago. The box was steel-reinforced concrete with the words, "For Logan, when they cross the line, Grandpa." Inside the box were 3 items: a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank, an old USB drive, and a handwritten note. "Son, if you're reading this, someone's trying to steal what's ours. The truth is darker than property lines." I kept quiet for good reasons, but I saved everything for the day when someone would need it. The surveyor has the maps. Tom knows why. Be careful who you trust, but trust Tom. He's been waiting just like I have. My hands shook as I read the note. What had Grandpa been hiding, and why did Tom know about it? As I held the USB drive up to my flashlight, I noticed it was labeled March 15th, 2014 for emergency only. The date meant nothing to me, but the careful way Grandpa had sealed it in a waterproof container told me it was important. There were other things in the safe too. A folder marked property records, directional, another labeled Barbara F. documentation, and strangest of all, a small evidence bag containing what looked like glass fragments with a tag reading from the scene HB. My grandfather had been methodical about whatever this was, treating it like the careful documentation he taught me to keep for every construction project. "Document everything, Logan," he used to say. "You never know when the foundation of lies someone built will need to be exposed." As if summoned by my thoughts, Tom appeared at my back door carrying a backpack loaded with supplies: flashlights, water, sandwiches, and a thick manila folder. "Figured you might need some help since Barbara cut your power," he said, but his usual friendly demeanor was gone. His face was grave, older somehow. "We need to talk, Logan, about why Barbara really wants you gone." He sat down heavily at the kitchen table and pulled out a photograph from the folder. It showed a young woman with a bright smile and kind eyes. Was my sister Emily. She was 22 years old, studying to be a nurse. She had her whole life ahead of her. Tom's voice cracked, and he had to stop for a moment to compose himself. March 15th, 2014. Emily was walking home from a late shift at the hospital. It was a quiet night. Barely any traffic on the old road that runs behind your property. Barbara had been at the HOA's annual gala drinking heavily. She was driving her Lexus at nearly 60 miles per hour when she hit my sister. Emily died instantly. The words hung in the air like concrete dust. I felt sick to my stomach. "Tom, I'm so sorry, but what does this have to do with?" He held up his hand. "Your grandfather saw everything, Logan. He was working late, mixing concrete for a project when it happened. His security camera caught the whole thing." Tom pulled another photo from the folder. This one showing the back of a black Lexus, its front end crumpled. Barbara never stopped. She drove home, reported the car stolen the next morning, then miraculously found it abandoned a week later. The police investigated, but without witnesses or evidence, the case went cold. Except your grandfather knew the truth. Tom's eyes met mine, and I saw 10 years of pain compressed into that single look. He was going to come forward, but my mother begged him not to. She couldn't bear the thought of Emily's death becoming a media circus, having her baby girl's last moments played out in court for everyone to see. Your grandfather agreed to stay quiet, but he kept the evidence. And he told me that one day, when the time was right, justice would come. The weight of it all hit me like a poorly mixed batch of concrete. My grandfather had carried this secret for a decade, watching Barbara build her little empire of fear on the foundation of my cabin's doorstep, knowing she was a killer. The glass fragments in the evidence bag suddenly made sense. They were from Barbara's windshield. Grandpa had been as methodical about preserving evidence as he'd been about every construction project. And Tom, grieving Tom, had moved here not just to be close to where his sister died, but to watch and wait for the moment when Barbara's carefully constructed lies could finally be demolished. I looked at the photo of Emily again, so young and full of promise, and felt something harden inside me like quick-set concrete. Barbara Fitzgerald thought she could bury the truth and build her kingdom on top of it. She was about to learn that some foundations, no matter how deep you pour them, can still be excavated. The next morning, Tom and I went to the bank together. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the safety deposit box. Inside were several items that made my stomach turn. A DVD labeled Security Footage, March 15th, 2014, hospital records showing Barbara admitted for injuries sustained in a fall that same night, and a handwritten letter on Barbara's personal stationery. Dear Mr. Brooks, the letter read, I'm begging you to reconsider. What happened was a terrible accident. I have young children who need their mother. Please, I've enclosed a check for your silence. I know it can't bring her back, but please, the check for $50,000 was still attached, uncashed. There was also a note from my grandfather. I kept quiet for Emily's mother, not for her killer. The truth always finds a way. Barbara thinks she owns this valley, but she's wrong about many things. I felt sick reading it all, but Tom's expression was carved from granite. She tried to buy her way out of killing my sister, he said quietly. Your grandfather was the only witness, and she knew it. That's why she's been trying to force out anyone who might know the truth. The Martinezes saw her car that night. The Patels asked too many questions about the accident. The Jacksons? Well, Mr. Jackson was a retired cop who never believed the stolen car story. I studied the evidence more carefully. The security footage DVD had multiple angles, including one that clearly showed Barbara's face illuminated by her car's interior light as she looked back at Emily's body before driving away. The hospital records were even more damning. Barbara had checked in at 3:17 a.m. with injuries to her right hand and forehead, claiming she'd fallen downstairs at home. But the attending physician had noted injuries inconsistent with reported cause and possible glass fragments in hand wound. There was even a police report filed by Barbara the next morning, claiming her Lexus had been stolen from the country club parking lot. She'd thought of everything, except for the old construction worker, mixing concrete late at night with a security system that captured it all. We spent the afternoon with Mike Johnson, the surveyor Tom had mentioned. Mike was in his 50s, a no-nonsense guy with calloused hands and sharp eyes, the kind who'd worked construction before becoming a surveyor. He spread out a large map dated 1955 on my kitchen table. Look here, he said, tracing the property lines with his finger. This is the original survey of the area. Your grandfather's father owned all this land, including what's now the main road into Pine Valley. When developers came in the 70s, he granted them an easement, which means they could use the road, but never owned it. Mike pulled out another document. Here's the kicker. In 2019, Barbara quietly had the fence lines moved, shifting them about 20 feet onto your property. She filed new documents with the county, but they're fraudulent. The original deed supersedes everything. I stared at the maps, my mind racing like a concrete mixer. So you're saying, Mike nodded grimly, the road Barbara's using to control access to Pine Valley, it's actually on Brooks' property. She's been trespassing for 5 years, and she knows it. That's why she's trying to force you out before you discover the truth. The pieces were falling into place like rebar in a form. Barbara wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was protecting multiple crimes: vehicular manslaughter, fraud, and theft of property. But why didn't she try this with my grandfather, I asked. Mike and Tom exchanged a look. She did, Tom said finally, but Henry had something she didn't count on. Me. Tom's confession came pouring out like concrete from a truck. I wasn't just Emily's brother, Logan. I was a licensed private investigator. After Emily died, I couldn't let it go. I knew Barbara was guilty, but I needed proof. So I moved to Pine Valley, became the friendly neighbor, and I've been watching her for 10 years. Every family she's forced out, every dirty trick, every fraudulent document, I've recorded it all. I've been waiting for someone with the legal standing to take her down. Your grandfather and I made a pact. He'd keep the evidence safe, and I'd wait for the right moment. Tom's eyes bored into mine. When Henry got sick, he made me promise to guide you to the truth if Barbara came after you. I'm sorry for the deception, but I had to know if you were strong enough to see this through. Tom pulled out a thick binder from his bag. 10 years of surveillance. Logan photos of Barbara meeting with county officials before the property line changes. Records of her targeting specific families. Financial documents showing she's been skimming from the HOA funds to pay for her lifestyle. Did you know she charges the HOA $1,500 a month for administrative services that consist of sending out violation notices? That's on top of embezzling from the road maintenance fund that doesn't actually maintain any road. The depth of Barbara's corruption was staggering. She'd built an empire of fear and fraud, all to cover up one terrible night when she'd chosen to run rather than face the consequences of taking a young woman's life. I felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all, like being buried in wet concrete. My grandfather hadn't just left me a cabin. He'd left me a responsibility to see justice done. But the statute of limitations on the vehicular manslaughter had long passed. Criminal charges were impossible now. So, what do we do? I asked. Tom leaned back in his chair, and for the first time in our conversation, he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Criminal court might be out of reach, but there are other forms of justice. Barbara values her reputation, her power, her perfect life above everything else. We're going to take it all away, piece by piece. I thought about Barbara's smug smile, her violation notices, that locked gate keeping me from my own property. Tom, give me 10 days. I'm going to handle this the way Grandpa would have wanted with Brooks' construction style. I made a phone call to Danny Morrison, an old Marine buddy who ran a trucking company and owed me a favor from our time in Afghanistan. Danny, remember that time in Kandahar when I saved your ass? Yeah, well, I'm calling it in. I need 3 trucks of construction materials delivered tomorrow. Rebar, forms, and enough concrete to build a bunker. And Danny, make sure one of the trucks has an accident right at the entrance to Pine Valley. Tom's eyes widened as he realized what I was planning. You're not really going to. I grinned for the first time in weeks. Oh, I'm going to show her what concrete justice looks like. Grandpa always said, the best revenge is perfectly legal, precisely engineered, and impossible to move without heavy machinery. At 5:30 the next morning, I was positioned perfectly to watch the show begin. 3 trucks loaded with steel beams, rebar, and construction materials rumbled up the mountain road. The lead driver, Danny's cousin, Rick, was a master of his craft. Right at the entrance to Pine Valley, directly in front of Barbara's precious electronic gate, there was a tremendous crack. The truck's axle snapped and tons of steel beams and rebar spilled across the road like giant pickup sticks. The second truck, trying to avoid the mess, jackknifed, spilling its load of concrete forms. The third truck, carrying bags of concrete mix, managed to stop, but was now blocking the road completely. The timing was so perfect, it looked like exactly what it was supposed to be, a tragic accident that completely blocked the only road in or out of Pine Valley. By 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already on scene in my construction gear, hard hat and all, looking every inch the concerned contractor, worried about his expensive materials. Officer Martinez arrived first, and I could swear I saw him trying not to smile. Morning, Logan. Looks like you got quite a mess here. I put on my best worried face. Officer, this is a $100,000 worth of materials for the new medical center project. Each beam needs to be carefully inspected for damage before we can move them. These are load-burning beams, you understand? Martinez nodded sagely. Of course, safety first. How long do you think cleanup will take? I made a show of examining the steel carefully. Well, with proper safety protocols and crane availability, maybe a week. Can't rush structural steel. You know what OSHA says? Barbara's meltdown was glorious to watch. She arrived at 7 sharp for her morning patrol, only to find her precious road completely blocked. Her face went from confused to furious to purple in about 30 seconds. By 8, she was screaming into her phone at the police dispatcher. By 9, 50 cars were lined up, honking their horns, and Barbara was standing in the middle of it all in her business suit, looking like she might spontaneously combust. By noon, I had set up a construction site break area next to the mess, complete with a food truck I'd called in. Gotta feed the cleanup crew, I told the growing crowd of irritated residents. Might be here a while. Concrete work can't be rushed. While I was slowly cleaning up the materials over the next few days, my real plan went into action. 5 of my best construction workers arrived with concrete trucks and equipment. Using the forms from the accident, we began constructing 12 massive concrete barriers, each 8 feet by 8 feet by 4 feet tall. But these weren't just barriers. They were architectural concrete planters reinforced with enough rebar to stop a tank. Each one weighed approximately 15 tons when filled. We worked through the nights pouring concrete with quick-set additives, creating geometric patterns in the faces. On each barrier, we embedded bronze letters. Brooks Construction, beautifying Pine Valley since 1955. The barriers were so well made they qualified as permanent architectural installations. But the real genius was what went inside the planters. Working with Tom late at night, we planted very specific vegetation. Ginkgo trees, which produce fruit that smells like rancid butter when it falls. Bradford pear trees, whose beautiful white flowers emit an odor reminiscent of rotting fish. And my personal favorite, Titan arum bulbs, also known as corpse flowers, which would bloom in about 30 days with a smell exactly like their name suggests. Between the plants, we mixed in fish emulsion fertilizer. Lots of it. Nature has its own justice system. I told Tom as we finished planting, and unlike the legal system, it doesn't care about statutes of limitations. By day 6, I had arranged the concrete barriers in a strategic pattern along the road. The accident cleanup was nearly done, but now cars had to navigate a serpentine course between 15-ton concrete blocks. The gaps were exactly 6 feet 1 inch, the legal minimum for emergency vehicle access. Cars had to slow to 5 miles per hour and carefully weave through, turning a 30-second drive into a 7-minute crawl. A bronze plaque announced, Pine Valley Beautification Project, Permanent Installation. Please drive carefully. Please limit 5 miles per hour. The community reaction was swift and dramatic. Day 6 saw residents complaining to Barbara about the delay. Day 7 brought the first wave of service refusals as delivery drivers and mail carriers declared Pine Valley too difficult to access. By day 8, the chorus had become deafening. "What did you do to make him do this?" they demanded at the emergency HOA meeting Barbara had called. The conference room was packed beyond capacity, and the mood was uglier than exposed aggregate. Barbara stood at the podium, her usually perfect appearance cracking like bad concrete, her voice shaking. "Logan Brooks is terrorizing our community. He's destroyed our quality of life with this concrete prison." But the residents weren't buying it anymore. "No, Barbara," said one woman I didn't recognize. "The question is, what did you do to him? Henry Brooks lived here for 50 years without causing anyone trouble. His grandson's been here 3 months, and suddenly there's a war." Barbara's face went white, then red. She started to speak, but another resident cut her off. "We've been talking, Barbara, about the Martinezes, the Patels, the Jacksons, about how anyone who questions you gets driven out, about how you've turned our community into your personal kingdom." The meeting dissolved into chaos, and Barbara fled with Brad scrambling after her. As she passed my seat in the back, she hissed, "You think you've won? I'll destroy you for this." I just smiled and whispered back, "Good luck moving 15 tons of concrete." Barbara's desperate attempts to regain control became increasingly unhinged over the next few days. First, she hired some local thugs to destroy the concrete barriers under cover of darkness. Unfortunately for them, I had embedded motion sensor cameras in the concrete itself, capturing everything in crystal clear, high definition. All 3 men were arrested before they could even scratch the surface. Next, she tried to ram through the barriers with her Lexus. But concrete reinforced with rebar doesn't care about luxury vehicles. She managed to total her car and had to be pulled out by a tow truck. While residents filmed with their phones, the footage went viral with the caption, "HOA President versus Concrete. Concrete wins." What Barbara didn't realize was that I had anticipated every possible attack on the barriers. The concrete mix I'd used included fiber reinforcement, along with the rebar, making it virtually indestructible without professional demolition equipment. Even then, each barrier was anchored 3 feet deep with concrete footings that spread out underground like tree roots. I'd basically created permanent fixtures that would require city permits, environmental impact studies, and hundreds of thousands of dollars to remove. When Barbara discovered this, she actually stamped her feet like a child having a tantrum right there in the middle of the street where everyone could see the mighty HOA president reduced to throwing fits at inanimate concrete blocks. Her last attempt at legal maneuvering fell apart spectacularly. She tried to sue me for obstruction, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But every lawyer she approached took one look at the case and laughed her out of their offices. As one attorney told her loud enough for half the coffee shop to hear lady, he put architectural planters on his own property. You're the one who moved the property lines. If anyone's got a lawsuit here, it's him against you for 5 years of trespassing. The smell apocalypse began on day 10. The ginkgo trees, helped along by the massive amounts of fish emulsion I'd been liberally applying each morning, began dropping their putrid fruit. The Bradford pears bloomed early thanks to the warm spell, filling the air with their distinctive dead fish scent. The biological warfare aspect of my revenge was particularly satisfying. You see, I'd done my research on these plants. Ginkgo trees are actually beautiful, historic trees that can live for thousands of years. Many cities plant them for their lovely fan-shaped leaves and golden fall color. They just happen to have one small drawback. The female trees produce fruit that contains butyric acid, the same compound found in rancid butter and vomit. Bradford pears, meanwhile, are notorious among landscapers for their fishy smell and weak wood that breaks in storms. But the crown jewel was the Titan arum, which produces the largest unbranched inflorescence in the world and smells exactly like rotting flesh to attract carrying beetles for pollination. Nature's own little jokes. Perfectly legal to plant, impossible to legislate against. By day 12, property values in Pine Valley had dropped 15%, according to online real estate sites. Pizza places refused to deliver. The mail carrier left packages at the gate. Even Amazon drivers took one whiff and marked packages as undeliverable. The tipping point came when Channel 7 News showed up to report on what they called the Great Pine Valley Stink-Off. Barbara, trying to save face, gave an interview where she completely lost it on camera, screaming about construction terrorists and assault by concrete and plants. The reporters barely contained smirk as she signed off. Standing in front of my architectural barriers with their bronze lettering gleaming was priceless. Reporting live from Pine Valley, where revenge is apparently set in stone and smells like rotting fish. I'm Jennifer Morrison, back to you in the studio. The impact on the community was more severe than I'd anticipated. The local grocery store reported a 40% drop in business from Pine Valley residents who couldn't be bothered to navigate the concrete maze multiple times a day. 3 families put their houses on the market within the first 2 weeks, explicitly citing HOA issues as the reason for selling. The school bus company threatened to stop service unless the traffic calming measures were removed. Even the fire department issued a formal complaint, though they admitted the barriers were technically legal since emergency vehicles could still pass through. Barbara's kingdom was crumbling, and everyone knew she was to blame. That evening, alone in my dark cabin, I had my one moment of doubt. I sat there looking at Grandpa's picture, and for the first time since this all started, I broke down. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Grandpa. The anger, the pain, it's eating me alive like rust on rebar. Is this really justice, or am I just as bad as she is? I remembered something he used to tell me when we were working with concrete, and I get frustrated with a difficult pour. Justice isn't about revenge, son. It's about making things right. Sometimes that means tearing down what's wrong so you can build something better. But remember, concrete is permanent. Make sure you're building something you can live with. I wiped my eyes and made a decision. It was time to give Barbara a choice. I sent her a text message. Meet me at the cabin tomorrow night. Come alone. We need to end this. She arrived at dusk, having walked the 2 miles from the gate through the increasingly pungent air. Her designer shoes were ruined, her clothes disheveled, and her face showed the strain of the past 2 weeks. But her eyes still held that cold defiance. I had set up the cabin with battery-powered work lights since the power was still cut, and my laptop sat open on the table. Sit down, Barbara. I have something to show you. She sat wearily, probably expecting some kind of trap. What she wasn't expecting was to see herself on the screen, 10 years younger, stumbling out of her Lexus on a dark road, looking at something in front of her car then driving away. The security footage was grainy, but clear enough. You could see her face, the license plate, even the HOA gala banner visible through the back window of her car. Barbara's face went white as concrete as she watched herself commit murder and flee the scene. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh God, I didn't mean I thought it was a deer at first, and then I saw her, but she was already, I panicked. She started sobbing, the Ice Queen facade finally cracking completely. That's when Tom walked in. Barbara looked up at him through her tears and recognition dawned. You're Emily's brother." Tom nodded, his face carved from stone. 10 years, Barbara. 10 years I've waited for this moment. "You have two choices," I said, my voice steady as poured concrete despite the churning in my stomach. "Option 1, this video goes to CNN, Fox, every major news outlet. It goes to the FBI, the state police, everyone. You'll lose everything and spend what's left of your life in prison." Barbara's sobbing intensified. "Option 2, I continued, you resign as HOA president immediately. You confess to the community about all your abuse of power, the fraudulent property lines, the harassment. You pay restitution to every family you've wronged, starting with $500,000 to Tom for Emily, and you leave Pine Valley forever." I set a timer on my phone. "You have 60 seconds to decide, starting now." Barbara looked at Tom desperately. "Please, my children. They don't deserve to have their mother taken away. They don't even know." Tom's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack like overstressed concrete. Emily didn't deserve to die at 22 either. She was going to be a pediatric nurse. She wanted to help children. The timer ticked down. 30 seconds. 2010th. With shaking hands, Barbara grabbed the resignation letter I'd prepared and signed it. "I'll do it. I'll confess everything. Just please don't destroy my children's lives. They're innocent in all this." I closed the laptop and looked at Tom. He nodded slightly. "Your children don't deserve to lose their mother to prison," I said, "but they also don't deserve to be raised by someone who thinks she's above consequences. Go fix your life, Barbara. Build yourself into someone they can actually be proud of." The special HOA meeting the next night was standing room only. Every single resident of Pine Valley's 30 homes was there, and the tension was thick enough to TR. Barbara stood at the podium, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked small, broken human. Her voice trembled as she began to speak. "I have something to tell all of you. For the past 5 years, I have abused my position as HOA president. I have harassed and driven out families who did nothing wrong except question my authority. I have manipulated property lines for my own benefit. I have embezzled funds from the HOA treasury to pay for personal expenses." The room was dead silent except for the sound of her voice and a few gasps. The Martinezes, the Patels, the Jacksons, they were good people who deserved better. I targeted them because they challenged me, because they didn't fit my vision of what this community should be. I was wrong, I was cruel, and I am deeply, deeply sorry. She went on to detail specific instances of her abuse of power, each confession drawing more shocked reactions from the crowd. "I will be paying full restitution to every family I've wronged. I'm also paying $500,000 to a fund in memory of Emily Sullivan." At the mention of Emily's name, Tom stood up from his seat in the back, tears streaming down his face. The room turned to look at him, then back at Barbara, and the weight of unspoken tragedy hung in the air like concrete dust. That's when Brad stood up. For 20 years, he'd been Barbara's enabler, her yes man, her puppet. But something had finally snapped in him like rebar under too much stress. 20 years, he said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. 20 years I've watched you turn from the woman I married into this. I knew about Emily, Barbara. I've always known. I helped you cover it up because I loved you, because I was weak, because I was afraid. He pulled out a manila envelope and threw it on the table in front of her. "Divorce papers. I'm done being your accomplice. I'm done living with the guilt. I'm done with all of it." Barbara stared at him in shock as he walked out, leaving her truly alone for perhaps the first time in her life. Tom stood up slowly, his voice with emotion. "I've wanted to hate you for so long. I've dreamed about destroying you, the way you destroyed my family." Emily was just walking home. She was texting me about her shift excited because she'd helped deliver a baby. She was so full of life, and you took that away. The room was utterly still, but Emily wouldn't want me to live in hatred. She always saw the good in people, always believed in second chances. So I'm not going to forgive you, Barbara. I'll never forgive you. But I'll let you leave. Get out of Pine Valley. Try to build yourself into someone better. Not for me, but for your children. They deserve a mother who understands consequences. The community voted unanimously to remove Barbara and the entire HOA board. Tom was elected as the new president, and his first act was to void every single ridiculous rule Barbara had put in place. The road maintenance fee was eliminated. The property lines were officially corrected. My concrete barriers, which had served their purpose, were converted into actual architectural features, with proper plantings turning the entrance to Pine Valley into a genuinely beautiful garden that also served as a traffic calming measure. Most importantly, the cabin was designated as the Emily Sullivan Memorial Youth Center, where I would teach construction skills to local kids, passing on the knowledge my grandfather had taught me. 1 month later, I was in the middle of teaching a group of teenagers how to mix concrete properly when Danny walked in with his phone and a huge grin. "Dude, you're not going to believe this." He showed me a video titled, "Ha, President Tries to Steal My Property," so I turned her neighborhood into a concrete maze with over 100 million views. The top comment read, "This is better than Netflix. When's the movie coming out?" I laughed, imagining what Grandpa would think about his grandson becoming an internet sensation. "He'd probably be confused about what the internet even is," I told Danny. "But I think he'd be proud that we stood up for what was right." That evening, Tom and I sat on the cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Pine Valley had never been more peaceful. Kids were playing in the youth center's yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You gave Barbara what Emily would have wanted," Tom said quietly, "a chance to rebuild herself into something better." I thought about justice and revenge, about the thin line between them, about the choices we make when we have power over someone who's wronged us. "Grandpa used to say that concrete is permanent." I replied, "Once it's set, you can't undo it. So before you pour, make sure you're building something that will stand the test of time. People deserve the same chance, I guess, to set properly, to become something solid and lasting." As the credits rolled on our strange story, a text popped up on my phone from an unknown number. "Saw your story online. I'm dealing with a similar HOA situation in my neighborhood. Can you help? P.S. Definitely not another HOA president, I swear." Tom read it over my shoulder and chuckled. Round 2. I cracked my knuckles and grinned. Better order more concrete. Looks like Brooks Construction is expanding into HOA consulting. And somewhere I'd like to think Grandpa Henry was smiling, knowing that his legacy lived on, not just in concrete and steel, but in the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the whole world seems stacked against you. Because in the end, that's what real justice looks like. Not just punishment, but the chance for redemption. Not just tearing down, but building something better in its place. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's worth more than revenge could ever be. Concrete sets permanently, but people given the chance can still change their shape.